All right. Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of something I haven't actually done before. Um, so for those of you that watched my daily December wrap up, I mentioned I wanted to make a video specifically talking about the differences between class based RPGs and classless. Um, and then eventually get into talking about other RPGs in general. So this is that original video about class versus classless. Um, I tried making this once before and it went poorly, to say the least. Um, Kind of forgot how long it had been since I had built a character in Open Legend, which is the classless RPG I'm going to talk about. So now that I've kind of refreshed everything, I think this should go a little bit better. Yeah, so let's just get into it because this is a little bit of a complicated subject. So, first things first, I want to kind of define what I mean by a class-based RPG versus a classless. Um, as it sounds, a class-based RPG is one where during character creation, you pick a class, and that guides your character development. You might be a fighter or a wizard or a thief or something along those lines. But by picking your class, you're kind of defining your character, how they're going to interact with the world. A lot of times, it will also give you a little bit of lore as well. Like clerics aren't just divine spellcasters; they're dedicated to a god. Paladins aren't just spellcasters with spells. They have specific ideals that they are expected to follow in order to remain a paladin. And sometimes those ideals change based on the deity they worship. Sometimes they just change based on the aspect of the deity that they worship, and sometimes they don't even require a deity. Sometimes it's just a set of ideals itself acts as a deity for them. Um, so yeah, your class is going kind of to define your character right from level one. Classless, on the other hand, is you don't actually select a class. They're also sometimes called skill based, not because they take any more skill to play, but because your abilities and how your play style is defined is based on the skills that you choose to add to your character or emphasize in your character or just utilize for your character. Um, in this one, if you wanted to be a very specific kind of hero, like you could play a paladin in a classless, but in order to do that, you have to pick a very specific set of skills in that, and you're not locked into them like you would be in a class-based one. Now, RPGs in general are going to be kind of on a spectrum to a point. You do have RPGs that are strictly class-based, where once you pick your class, that's it. You don't dip into other classes. There might be a lot of choices inside your class, but you pick your class, you stick to it from level 1 to max level. And then on the other end of the spectrum, there's ones where there are no classes. Everyone can do everything. There's no real limitations, It's just based on your abilities themselves. So anyone with agility can use daggers and backstab. Anyone with strength can wield heavy armor and shields. It doesn't matter. There's very few that are on those extremes, like a pure, very strict class-based RPG. If I remember correctly, because it's been a while since I played it, would be something like the Dragon Age RPG, where you actually pick a class at the start, and there really is no multi-classing. If you are a mage, you are a mage. You're not going to be able to take skills from the rogue tree or the warrior fighter. I can't remember what they call it. However, within the mage tree, there's a lot of variations. So you can have multiple mages and not have them just feel like they're copies of each other. And then a pure skillless, in my opinion, would be more along the lines of GURPS. If you're unfamiliar with it, GURPS stands for Generic Universal Role Playing System, and it is exactly that. It is 100% generic. You can literally use it for any kind of game you want. You want to play kind of a Vampire the Masquerade style game where there's a lot of intrigue and suspense and a lot of character interaction, but combat is a little bit more sparse. You can do it. And you can set that game in medieval Europe all the way up to the year 3022. You want to play a classic high fantasy, you can do it. You want to do steampunk, you can do it, and everything in between. They have tools, and you basically flavor text everything in GURPS to make it whatever you want. D&D falls a little more into mostly class-based, with a few things. There's some feats and the ability to multi-class that allows you to pick more things. So it's not super strictly class-based, but it is the traditional class-based. So, and then Open Legends is kind of the other side. It's not strictly classless, because there are certain abilities and certain banes and boons and feats that require you to take other feats and kind of pigeonhole you a little bit into a certain style. But for the most part, it's open-ended. So that's why I'm going to use those two to compare. Also, they're both systems that I'm currently running campaigns in, so I'm actually familiar with both pretty well. So the way we're going to do this is I'm actually going to make basically the same or a very similar character in both, to just kind of show you the difference between playing in a classless versus a class-based. So let's actually go over, and we're going to start off with this is D&D Beyond. It is the online character builder, the official online character builder for D&D 5th edition. I really like it. I think it's a really powerful character builder. It makes things very, very, very simple to build a character. My only issue with it is, you can see behind me, I've got a ton of D&D books. I have almost every source book released for 5th edition. I think I'm only missing, not Volo's, one of the monster books that I can't for the life of me remember the name right now. And I think the Acquisitions Inc. book I don't have, even though technically it's not a core rule book. Those are the only two like rule books I don't have, and I'm missing quite a few adventures. I think the last adventure I purchased was I think it was Ravenloft, actually. So I'm missing a few adventures, but for the most part, I have most of the rules in book form. If I wanted them in the character builder, I have to basically rebuy them all, which I'm not thrilled about, but I understand why. So anyway, I like character builders. They make things significantly easier on new players, on theory crafters like myself, where we like to just go, well, what if I did this and this and this, and, you know, just trying weird stuff, and just people that like to play. For Open Legend, I'm also going to be using a character builder. It's not quite as robust as D&D Beyond, and it's not a quote-unquote official character builder. It's not licensed by the company that made Open Legend, like D&D Beyond is. But it's fantastic, and due to the fact that Open Legends is a open source RPG, it'd be kind of weird to see them license anything anyway. So I think this specifically is going to be the closest you're going to get to an official Open Legend character builder, and it's really nice. So let's start off with the one that most of you are familiar with, which is D&D. I've already basically turned on everything here just so I can show you guys the full list of stuff. And let's just turn it into Terran. We're going to call this character Terran. So let's get into the actual building itself. As you can see, these are all the different races. This is a very, very common thing in class-based RPGs in general. Is you will have races or cultures. I've seen them are getting more popular. These are basically lore reasons to have modifiers to your ability scores. This is going to be the first thing that starts kind of defining your character, because all of these races have inherent things that they are better at or worse at. In earlier editions, racial bonuses could be positive or negative. In 5th edition, they're always positive. And you can see, like, if we go here, you get a strength +2, charisma +1 if you're a dragonborn. Or if we go to elf, you can see there's a lot of different elves here. So if I went with Eladrin, you get dexterity increased by 2. And that's it. Or if I go with Wood Elf, dex increased by 2, and I thought Wood Elf would also give me wisdom. Maybe I'm thinking of a different one. No. Anyway, so those are the different things. Just to make things simple, I'm going to go with a human, and just to kind of show the full route of the differences, I'm going to go with a human variant because it gives us a feat at first level, and that's going to be able to help us make a little bit better apples to apples comparison between the two groupings. So we'll go with human. We'll do that. And then this is another nice thing about this is it tells you exactly what you need to do. So your language. Let's have him speak Elvish because that's cool. Ability score increase. Now this is where generally I would move ahead and pick a class and might even pick a background before completing everything here. Simply because my ability scores are kind of going to be based on the class I want to play, which again is very common for class-based RPGs. Each class is going to have specific ability scores or attributes that they tend to rely heavily on. In D&D 4th edition, they would actually list in the player's handbook your primary stat is dexterity, your primary stat is intelligence, and then they list some secondary stats. So you would know, okay, if I'm going to play this character, I need to give intelligence my highest. In the 5th edition PHB, they're not quite so blatant in it because they want to leave it a little more open for people to play the way they want. But the last section before you get into the meat of the class is always called Quick Build, and it will tell you where you should put your two highest stats to play the class as well as possible. Now, because I'm going to be making this same character-ish twice, I already know what I'm going to make, which is going to be a monk. And so I'm going to go dexterity and wisdom, because in 5th edition, that's what monks use. Skill, I get proficiency in any skill I want. I'm going to go with, let's say, sleight of hand. Let's make me a sneaky monk. If you've actually ever met a martial artist that has dedicated their life to martial arts, which is basically what a monk is, it's surprising how much control they have over their limbs and digits and the things like that. Like, they're really, really dexterous. So the idea of a monk that's adept at moving things so that people don't notice them moving is not outside the realm of reason. And then we get to pick a feat. I'm going to pick the feat a little bit later, just because I want to get to the rest of it first. And that's another nice thing about the character builders. You can kind of go back and forth between these screens to pick out whatever you want. By the way, I'm not affiliated with D&D Beyond at all. I just like this system. So we're going to go monk. I'm going to add that class. And then again, it tells me this stuff I need. Choose a musical instrument. I'm a big fan of the dulcimer. It's a cool instrument. We get to choose some monk skills. Gotta go acrobatics. And again, was kind of a sneaky monk. So let's make a stealth monk. Everything else is already done for me. We can go to... someone has tweeted me. We can go to ability scores. To make things easier on both of them, I'm going to use just a standard array for both of them. So here I just click standard array. And again, dexterity should be my highest, followed by wisdom. However, since I already get a +1 from wisdom for my racial, I can actually do a 13 here and still have a 14 wisdom, which gets me up a +2 instead of a +1. And I can put my other 14 in Constitution, be a little bit harder to hit. For this month specifically, I'm going to say they're okay with strength. They're, more intelligent than some, but they're just not a people person. And so that gets everything there. And then the final things we need a background. Now, we could go through all the different backgrounds here. There's actually not a lot because this is just the free stuff. By the way, everything I'm doing today, this is all free. All you need to do is create an account with D&D Beyond, and you'll have access to literally everything I've shown you thus far. The only things I've purchased for the character builders, I purchased a feat and the shadow... Way of Shadow Monk's subclass, specifically so I could make my D&D character Aether in this builder. So we're going to go, just for something interesting, I'm going to go with Acolyte. Traditionally, the word monk actually refers to someone who devotes themselves entirely to a religion. If you think of like the Franciscan monks here, or even Shaolin monks, which is what the monk characters built off of, they dedicate themselves to belief structure in addition to martial arts. They use martial arts to further their discipline for their study into Buddhism and vice versa. So, yeah, I think an acolyte actually makes a lot of sense for a monk character. So I get a couple extra languages. And due to the fact it's divine, let's choose a divine language. And let's go Dwarvish. Always fun to be able to speak Dwarvish. Everything else is picked out for me, and the last thing I need to do is pick out some equipment. So with your class and background, they will give you a list of starting equipment, or you can just choose gold and buy your starting equipment. To make this simpler, I'm just going to choose equipment. So to let me pick, I'm going to choose any simple weapon, and I'm going to use a quarterstaff, because again, that's very monk like. You see a lot of monks in folklore that use a staff. Kind of cool. I myself actually have trained a little bit in staff work. I have a staff behind this thing over by my door that I used to practice for spinning. We'll go Dungeoneer's pack just because I like it. We got darts, holy symbol. We're just gonna call it an amulet. Give him a prayer book, and that's it. Now we can go back. Remember, we had some stuff. We still need to choose a feat. So we have the monk. Let's see what feats we have here. Wow, this is a lot more feats than I remember. And I actually like martial adept, simply because it's going to again kind of fit a little bit more into what we're talking about here. So I'm going to go martial adept, and I'm going to choose disarming attack and pushing attack. So for those of you who don't know, martial adept actually gives you a feature that's normally limited to Battlemaster fighters, where you get a thing called a superiority die, and you can use it when you make an attack to add certain extra things. This one, you can force it to drop an item it's holding. Pushing, you can actually just push it up to 15 feet away. So both really useful, really interesting, and they will play into the other thing as well. So that's it. This is our variant human monk. As you can see, now one thing I forgot to do, I'm going to very quickly head back here, and we're going to go back to equipment, and we're actually going to wield some of the things that will show up on my character sheet. So I just needed those two things. So now I open this up, and this is my monk, and these are my dart attacks, my quarterstaff attack. This is how it works. Yeah, pretty simple, pretty easy. Now, to kind of talk about specifically what a monk is, so we can kind of recreate in a classless. And this is something that tends to be beneficial for class-based systems over classless. In class-based systems and RPGs, you're able to specialize and be more unique than other things. Case in point, the monk. I chose this specifically because of unarmed strike. In the D&D, anyone can do an unarmed strike. It uses your strength to make the attack roll. So if we were a normal class, we would have a plus 2 to our attack instead of a plus 5, because we would use a plus 0 plus our proficiency bonus, and that's how it would work. And then for the damage, it's your 1 point plus your strength modifier for anyone else. So we would literally do 1 damage with our punch. However, as a monk, we have special rules that allow us to do things differently than everyone else. Our unarmed strikes, our punches, can use our dex instead of our strength. They do more damage. It's a D4 instead of just 1. And it gets more powerful as we get higher. And then we add our dex modifier to it. So that makes the monk different than any other class. And if any class wants to be able to do that, either they have to take a level in monk, or they have to take a feat called Tavern Brawler that makes your punches a little bit more powerful, but they don't upgrade as you get higher. You still have to use strength. So this is a very unique monk thing. The other thing we have is if we make an attack action, or if we take the attack action and make either an unarmed strike or a strike with a monk weapon, which the quarterstaff counts as a monk weapon, we can make an unarmed strike as a bonus action. So not only can monks punch better than other people, they also can attack a little bit faster than other people. Any other class would have to use 2-weapon fighting, and you can't 2-weapon fight with unarmed strike, because for other classes, unarmed strike doesn't count as a weapon, without getting too much into the nitty-gritty of what does and doesn't count as a weapon. So at level 1, a monk is really good at punching, better than anyone else, so they can punch as their primary attack if they want. They can attack a little bit faster than other people with those punches. Now, the other system I'm going to show you, their max level is 10. Because D&D's max level is 20, I'm actually going to level this dude up to 2. Just to kind of put them on the same playing field. So we go to level 2. Boom. It adds key, which is the other kind of defining feature of a monk. And it's something that no other class gets. They have key points. They can use them to do what's called flurry of blows, which makes them attack even faster. And they also get this thing called unarmored movement. They move faster than other classes as well. If we go through this, it'll show me anything else I need to fix. By leveling up with level 2, you don't really need to choose anything. I can just go to my character sheet. As you can see, a little bit higher hit points, always nice. And you can see bonus action, they have flurry of blows there. So you can see my speed is 40 feet, so I'm faster than most classes. But Barbarian is the only other class that gets a speed increase. And again, this kind of points towards what makes a class-based... one of the advantages of a class-based RPG is you get to feel special. Because you are specialized, you feel special. At level 2... no other class can make 3 attacks in a turn, but a monk can. At level 3 or at level 2, only one other class can move more than their base speed, and that's the barbarian. So there's only two that are as fast as the monk. Um, and at level 2, there's no other class that can punch as well as the monk. And then the key things is you also have things like, for a key point, they can take a dodge action as a bonus action, meaning they're harder to hit sometimes. They can use a key point to either disengage or dash, meaning they're even faster and they can get out of combat without being hit. So again, the monk is very specialized, is very unique, and it plays differently than all the other classes, and that's a hallmark of a class-based RPG, and one of these strengths, I feel. Now, if we go to Open Legend, as you can see here, no class, and there's a lot of different things. That's one of both the strengths and the weaknesses of a class-based system. In general, they're going to have more attributes, more skills, the things like that. In a class-based RPG, we have 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And those are fairly standard. I would say probably 90% of the class-based systems have only 6 stats. Some add a couple extra ones, depending on the setting or the things that they want to do. But in general, you're going to have something involving strength, something involving dexterity, something involving constitution or fortitude, something like that, something dealing with book smarts, which is intelligence, something dealing with street smarts, which is wisdom, and then something about influencing other people in various ways. Now we go to Open Legend. That's the actual, we'll come back to this, but these are the actual rules, which are free. Just go to openlegendrpg.com and you can see the entire core rulebook, everything. It's really great. And you can actually also buy the physical rulebook, and they have their own campaign setting you can buy from them as well, and they're great. Not affiliated with Open Legend either. I just really like them as an RPG system. So going back here, again, we have similar things. We have agility, which is the dexterity, basically. We have might, which is the strength. We have fortitude, which is kind of constitution. Everything else from there starts getting a little bit more complicated, which is another defining feature of a classless RPG, which is they're complicated. In order to be able to do everything that you want, be able to make interesting, unique characters, they have to have a lot of options, and none of them are kind of grouped together or anything into a class to make things simpler. There's just tons of different things. So you can see here, we've got learning, which is basically all of the, or almost all of the intelligence-based skills like history, arcana, religion. All of those are remembering or recognizing aspects of something based on your memory. Those would all be in learning. Logic is trying to figure out something. In D&D, that would kind of be covered under just a base intelligence check, or the specific thing like history or arcana. If you're trying to figure out how a magical device would work, you would roll arcana in D&D. You would use logic in Open Legend. Perception is basically seeing things, which is there is a perception skill in D&D based on the wisdom stat, but there's also investigation, which is intelligence based. And you also have things like catching a gut feeling, trusting your instincts, which is kind of along the realms of insight, where you're kind of reading people and kind of getting what you feel. So this is a combination of intelligence and wisdom skills. And then will um, is actually very commonly attributed to like wisdom's saving throws in D&D 5e. Though it can also intelligence saving throws might be in there as well. Constitution saving throws where it says resisting to torture, you might put that as a con save instead of a wisdom save. There's a lot of different things, but you can see the mental stuff is all wisdom and uh, intelligence, but they're kind of split up into four different things. And then you have social. All three of these things would be covered under uh, um, charisma in fifth edition, with presence being the one that's the most unique, where it's deception easy, you lie to someone. Persuasion, you could convince them. Presence is literally everything else that's not lying or persuading someone. If you try to inspire someone, that's presence. You can actually heal people in open legend using your presence score. If you want to be really lucky, that would be a presence roll. Um, if you want to kind of browbeat someone, like intimidate them, that would be presence. So you can see charisma gets split into three different attributes instead of like the D&D, where the attribute is the same. It's just different skills that you might be trained in or not. And then we have this. 8 different extraordinary abilities, and these actually don't fit into a specific attribute like they would in fifth edition. These are actually things that you use to do something. They don't actually affect your character makeup, like what they're intrinsically good at. These are much more akin to skills that they're good at using. Alteration, changing one thing into another thing. Creation is things like healing energy, creating new items. Energy, fireballs, lightning bolts, anything you would see a mage using to cast elemental spells, along with a ton of other things, would be energy. Entropy, death magic, necromancy, stuff like that. Influence, the magical ability to influence people. Instead of just being very persuasive, this is like charm magic or mind control, psychic abilities. All those things would be influence. Movement is the unnatural ability to move. Ki would kind of fit into movement, because Ki can make a monk move much faster than he should be able to do. Punch much faster. Also, things like telekinesis or haste, which would normally be magic in 5th edition, would be movement. Prescience, which I only learned how to pronounce like a few months ago, because one of my characters thought they were putting a point in presence, and they did prescience in general, and we turned their character into a quasi-psychic, quasi-seer, actually. Prescience is the ability to see the future, read minds, the more mental aspects of telepathy, whereas movement would be the more physical stuff, telekinesis, stuff like that. And then protection, the unnatural ability to protect yourself or other. Could be magic, could be super tough skin like Superman has, or or Luke Cage, stuff like that. It doesn't all have to be mystical in nature, but that's how it is. And that kind of illustrates another aspect of skillless RPGs, is their abilities and attributes and skills and the things like that tend to be very general, to allow for people to kind of flavor text them into their own thing. To give you an example, if I wanted to play an all-powerful mage, I wanted to play someone that can launch fireballs and hurl lightning bolts and cause the earth to break apart. somewhat similar to what you would see in like a Dragon Age game. Like if you ever played Dragon Age Inquisition and you chose the mage, depending on which school, you could freeze someone, hurl a fireball at them, and then call down lightning at them, all within a couple of seconds. If I was to make that character here, one of the things is I would give them a high energy score, and they would use their energy score for every single one of those attacks. I hurl a fireball, it's an energy roll. I call lightning down from the sky, it's an energy roll. I freeze someone in place, it's an energy roll. On the flip side, if I wanted to play someone like Cyclops, who has this optic beam that they can shoot, I would also use energy for all my optic blasts, because it is a form of energy to attack it, and you have range, and you can he can change the intensity of the beam and the width and everything to use his needs, to suit his needs. By the way, if you've never actually looked into the character of Cyclops compared to what you see in the X-Men movies, Cyclops is super awesome. He doesn't just have the whole energy beam thing. Like, he has amazing spatial awareness and can reflect beams of a bunch of surface. His trigonometry is amazing, and he also has all these leadership skills, and he's a super good martial artist. Like, Cyclops is super cool, and he really kind of got shafted in the X-Men movies because he wasn't Hugh Jackman. Yeah, as you can see in Open Legends, while those two characters would technically play very differently, their character sheets would look very similar, with the big difference being for the all-powerful wizard, they probably wouldn't have as high physical scores and much higher mental scores, whereas the Cyclops character would have decent physical scores, and then things like logic and perception would be really high. The rest might not be as high, because he wasn't a genius. He was just very, very good at a specific kind of intelligence, which was judging trigonometric angles and the things like that, and overseeing a battlefield. And that's one of, I think, as much as it's a strength that you can create any kind of character you want, it's also a bit of a weakness in classless RPGs as well, simply because your actual raw ability scores and your ability to do things, if you go purely by the rules as written and not using your own kind of lore and story elements to limit and shape your characters, there's going to be a lot of people that can do the exact same thing that you can do. And it can sometimes be very difficult to feel special until you get to much higher levels. So let's actually build the character now. So again, I mentioned we're going to use a standard array. In Open Legend, they actually have a couple different arrays you can use. Again, with it being a classless RPG, you can just build it entirely using a point-buy system, very similar to D&D. They have a point-buy system, but this one is even more, like, you can have zeros. You will have zeros in most of your stats. And so you can go for a lot of different things. I'm going to use the specialized hero because that's basically what we did in 5th edition, using the standard array. We have one stat we're really good in, one stat we're somewhat good in, some neutral stats, and then stuff that we're bad at. So that's what we're going to do here. So let's go back to the character builder. Just like before, I want this to be a very agile style character. We're going to go our 5 in agility. Oh, and I might as well put a level 1 there. The nice thing about this character builder, it's not quite as hands-on as the D&D Beyond is, but it does auto-populate everything for you as long as you type the right numbers in. And it'll tell you, your point totals and stuff like that, which is really useful when leveling up. Due to the fact that we're using an array, this isn't as important to us as it would be to someone that's just doing a point buy. It's still very useful. So agility is our highest thing. Now, again, a lot of the monk's abilities come from kind of supernatural ability to move fast, punch fast, things like that. So we're going to put our second highest thing as movement. Just like that. So we are giving him an extraordinary ability, which is typical of a monk or a folklore style martial artist. They could do things like, walk on water, run across tree branches, the things like that. So we want that. As before, we've got 5, 4, 3, 2, 2, 2. So as before, he's going to have a little bit of fortitude. He's not good at strength, but he's not bad at it. So I'm going to put just 2 there. So he has a little bit of strength. Again, we had a 10 in ours. This would technically be closer to like a 12-ish, a little above average, but it fits for the most part. The other things, being a monk, again, because it's a wisdom-based character, they can kind of resist quite a few things. So I'm going to put some stuff in will there. Wisdom perception is another big thing for him. So I'm going to go ahead and put a 2 there, and that is our character. Now, again, with a classless system, there's actually a lot more room for specialization. If I don't want a 2 here, I could go a 1 here, and then I could also put, let's say, they're a very inspiring monk. They're again, we're an acolyte, so we maybe we proselytize to other people, so we can put something there. And maybe we're just really good. Not only it's inspiring people to do better, but persuading them that our specific God is like the best God. So just by doing that and changing one thing, we've kind of modified how the character works. In 5th edition and class-based in general, you have a little bit more limitations. Like if we wanted to really make this a really interesting monk, we could get rid of all 3 of these, and we could go give him some energy abilities. Maybe this is a monk more along the lines of Avatar, the Last Airbender, where they can control the elements with their martial arts. Or maybe this isn't a monk to do that. Maybe this is like a living death monk, where they control necromancy and negative energy and suck life out of people. Or, it'd be really cool. Maybe this isn't a monk like any of those. Maybe this is more of an alchemist. Kind of like Louis Armstrong from Full Metal Alchemist, where through their control of their muscles and a little bit of magic, they can create amazing things. Shoot off, punch a stone and make it look like spikes with their face on it and stuff like that. Again, this is something that classless RPGs excel at, is the ability to make unique and very custom characters, which kind of sounds like it contradicts with my last point where you don't feel as special. It's a two-edged sword. On one hand, you can add these little skills without having to dip into another class. On the other hand, anyone with a point in alteration can do the same things you can do. Anyone with some energy abilities can do the same things as you can do. So I'm going to go back to just having the perception. But again, big advantage of classless, you have a lot more control over making unique, weird characters. And with Open Legends specifically, it just gets more customizable as you go.
Um, so, the next thing we talked about feats in 5th edition, and this is another really big thing. 5th edition specifically made it that feats massively change how your character plays. The feat we chose was gives us a superiority die. That changes how the character plays. You can randomly add extra damage. You can move people around. You can take their weapons from them, like anything like that. Really changes how the monk plays, because instead of just going up and just bopping people, now you can kind of control the battlefield. Go over and push someone into a group of people, so they're now in fireball formation. Or the bad guy who has a wicked magic greatsword that is just killing everyone. You go over, punch him in the arm, and make him drop his greatsword. All things like that. Feats in Open Legend are much more about customizing your character. There's significantly more common, to the point where we actually have 6 feat points we can spend, and the most expensive feat you will find is 3. So at level 1, you're going to start with a minimum of 2 feats, and maybe a lot more depending on how you build your character. Now, this is another thing I love about this character builder, is I go here, view available feats. This is every feat I currently could add to my character. Each one, it gives me a description of how it works, any prereqs I need for it. It's super cool. I love it. Now again, we're making a monk, so we need to try and find things that are going to turn this a little bit more into the monk worth of the thinking about playing, which again is this kind of acolyte of a deity or religion. They can attack faster than most and do some cool stuff, and they can punch better than most. So first things first, we need to make it so this character can punch. In a lot of RPGs, everyone can punch, but they're not very good at it. Open Legend, these are the weapons you can use, and one of the weapons is unarmed strike. These things specifically are going to color how it works. Property forceful means you can use might to attack with it. That doesn't help us because our might score is really low. And again, we want this to be an agility-based character. Precise is the other option. You can use agility to attack with it. So already, we don't have to take a special feat or anything we need to be able to punch as well as a monk. Anyone with an agility score or a might score at all can punch just as well as we can. So for playing the character we want, that's a plus. We don't have to do anything complicated to get that. For being unique to where we do punching better than anyone else, but because we're a monk, that we don't get. Anyone can do the exact same thing that we do. So positives and negatives there. We'll talk about Banes later. And Swift actually fits into our monk, where Swift gives you advantage on advantage 2 on initiative rolls to make it very basic. Advantage works slightly different in Open Legend, where you could have multiple levels of advantage, and they always affect. We'll go back to the character builder. Your attribute, the dice. Like for agility, if we were to make an agility roll, we would roll a d20, add 2d6. If we had advantage 1, we would add we would roll 3d6 and take the highest 2 because our dice are still 2d6. We had advantage 4, we would roll 4d6, take the highest 2. Disadvantage the same way. If we had disadvantage 4, we would write 2d6 plus 4 extra d6 for a total of 6d6, and take the 2 lowest.
because we still only used 2. So Swift just gives us advantage on an initiative. Again, fitting into that monk stereotype or monk idea of we are faster than most. We're going to be able to react faster. Again, when you go back to this, anyone wielding an unarmed strike, which basically means anyone with nothing in one hand, can claim they're wielding an unarmed strike and have this swift feature and be just as fast as us. So again, it fits the character we want to play. That's a good thing. We don't have to do anything fancy for that. We don't need to know the system super well to get what we want. Bad thing, it's also not unique to us. Or somewhat a bad thing. You may not find that as a bad thing, but the idea of being unique and feeling special in the game is a little bit lessened, because literally anyone can do it. And that's something you'll see a lot in classless RPGs, is the idea of, well, just because you can, I might as well put this in here, just because you can doesn't mean you should. If you don't have a character reason to do something, then in a classless RPG, you would probably limit yourself. With the example before, Cyclops, since he'd be using energy for his optic blasts, because energy can be used to throw bolts of lightning and fire and stuff like that, he could just say, well, I make my optic blast fire and I burn everything. Even though in the comics, the optic blast is actually a percussive blast. There's no heat to it at all. It's just force. However, since it hits things and impacts them often, it can create heat through friction, which is another reason why you really need to check out Cyclops. He's a super cool character. So, again, that's something you're going to see is in a classless RPG, a min-maxer can massively dominate a game, because so much of classless RPGs are based on you setting your own limits, and min-maxers in general are going to try and use the mechanics of the game to make themselves as powerful as possible and not use any limits on their characters. So again, pluses and minuses. So we've got the ability to punch really well, because that's kind of a monk thing. And again, they call it unarmed strike instead of a punch because it could be a knee, it could be a shin, it could be an elbow, it could be a shoulder. Again, it allows you to say, well, I come up and I kick him in the chest, and then I come around and give him a spinning back fist across the jaw. Instead of going up, I punch him twice. And that's true in both D&D and Open Legends. They call it unarmed strike to give you a little more cool factor when you're attacking. So you go back to the feats. Now, again, one of the other things of being a monk is you can attack faster and more often than other classes. So let's find a way to do that using feats. This is where you're going to specialize yourself and give you abilities that other characters don't. Because while anyone can take feats, because your feat points are limited, there's much less likely a chance of someone accidentally having the exact same feats as you, with a few exceptions with feats that are just really useful in general. The first one we're going to do is actually really useful, but we're going to go down to multi-attacks specialist. You can see it costs 3 to do it, and it basically, it's a really long explanation, which is again very common for classless RPGs, because again they're very generic in general. To be able to let you play the character you want, they're generally going to have a lot of more generalized explanations of abilities and skills and the things like that. And because of that, it just takes more words to say, because you're not allowed to go, you get a +2 to punch attacks. You have to go, okay, well, you get a +2 to any attacks involving, blunt damage or something like that. I'm just making this up. For this one, it's really complicated. But if you go down here, all of that is examples of how this works. Because it's so complicated, they have a lot of examples to make it less complicated. The basics of it are, with multi-attack specialist, you can attack multiple times on your turn as a major action. You declare how many attacks you want to make, and you get disadvantage for each additional attack. Disadvantage to the 3 for each additional attack. For every level of multi-attack specialist, first of all, to make multiple attacks, you have to have this feat. And for each level or tier in the feat, it reduces the disadvantage by 1. So we're going to actually go back and give multi-attack specialist level 1, which will take half of our skill points, and that lets us flurry of blows, basically. If you look at this, it specifically lists flurry of blows. It also talks about dual wielding, chain lightning, stuff like that. So a lot of different classes can use this. It will, or a lot of different builds can use this. It will manifest in different ways. But mechanically, it's all kind of the same. The other thing I mentioned before, again, monks are better at punching than other things. So we're actually going to go here to martial focus. Again, right now, everyone can punch just as effectively as we can. This is going to allow us to... this is going to allow us to be that much better at punching specifically. So you choose a single weapon. We're going to choose unarmed strike, and specify the attribute your martial focus relies on. It's going to be agility for us. And it basically lets us count our attribute as one higher for that. So we are better at making attacks unarmed than anyone without this feat, specifically chosen for unarmed strikes with agility. This gets us more into that feeling of being special. I must, there we go. Martial focused. I'm going to go unarmed strike, I think is what it was. We'll go back here and look. Yeah, unarmed strike. There. And then now, again, we have a 5 in agility. So anything that uses agility, which could be balancing on a tightrope or sneaking around stealthily, which is another thing our other monk does, we would use 2d6. But just to show you guys, you wouldn't do this on the character sheet. For punching, the thing that we're really good at, we actually get to use 2d8 instead of 2d6. Another nice thing about this character builder, if you do something wrong, it will tell you, hey, you got too many points there. So I go back to 5, and it's fixed. Yeah, now we've gotten that little specialization. We had to take a feat in order to do it, and that means we can't do other things like I want to do like fleet of foot, which would make us faster, which is something we might take at a higher level, or where did you go? Climbing. The ability to run on walls is a monk thing. In D&D, you get that at level 9. Theoretically, here, we could get a level 1 if that was what we wanted to focus our monk on. It's just like running along walls and being hyper mobile. All the things are possible. You just have to build them very specifically, and you have to make choices about what you want now versus later. So you've got that stuff there. We're going to actually put in here our weapons, and we're going to dual wield our unarmed strike. I know in the other one we had a monk weapon. I like monks that just do a hand to hand without weapons. So we're going to do that. We're not going to wear any armor because monks don't wear armor. In 5th edition, you have unarmored defense, which again, there's a feat for that. But again, we had to make choices about what we were going to do. So we have no armor or range stuff right now. But you can see it's already put the advantage in there for an initiative. We already have our hit points, which at level 1 in Open Legend, we have more hit points than level 2 for level 2 monk in the D&D. And that's just the different systems. Neither one is actually higher because you do different damage in each system. I just thought it was funny. And then our stuff. We actually have a guard, which is similar to what AC would be there. And we have a guard of 17. We have a decently high guard because it puts our agility in there. It also puts our might in there. And then toughness and resolve the other things. As you can see, our speed, we're not faster than anyone else. Again, because we didn't choose that feat. Because of the kind of genericness of this, in order to make the character feel special, we have to kind of pick and choose which ones. Obviously, as you level up, you can specialize even more and more. We have perks and flaws. They're optional. I'm not going to deal with them right now. They're kind of similar to backgrounds, except with the idea that you have positive and negative aspects of it, whereas backgrounds only really give you a positive aspect for the most part. So we'll, well, you know what? I did a background, so we might as well. These are the perks and flaws, and just because we've already discussed we're an acolyte. To make this really simple, we're going to choose Divine Agent for our perk, which, as you can see, once per game session, you're subject to a finishing blow. Basically, if you're going to get killed, you go back up to 1 HP once per game session. Kind of useful. Nothing like that in 5th edition from a background. Backgrounds are much weaker in 5th edition. But we're also going to give us a flaw, which is, again, because we're divinely based, we're going to say we're zealous. Meaning, if we're given the option to do something to further the will of our God, even if it hurts our party or hurts us, we are a zealot. We're always going to do that because that's what we do. Actions. And this is the final thing that's going to kind of solidify the ability to be a monk and kind of give us the last bits of really cool monk stuff. You have these things called banes and boons. The real basic of it is banes are bad things you can do to other characters. Boons are good things you can do to other characters or yourself. We're going to start with banes. So remember how we had to take a feat to get the ability to sometimes disarm an opponent? And you can actually only use that superiority dice once per... I'm actually going to look it up because I can't remember. Feat. You gain 1 superiority dice per short rest. So we can only do disarming attack once per short rest, or pushing attack once per short rest. Well, when we go to Open Legend, Disarmed is just an ability. It is a bane, and we can use agility or movement. A movement, in this case, would mean we telekinetically rip the thing from their hands. Agility, we can just do it. We can make a roll against their guard defense. If we beat it, we can drop an object they're holding in a space of your choosing within 15 feet of the target. And when we get to that level 6, we can actually just take the item from them, which isn't possible using superiority dice in 5th edition. They don't specifically mention, oh, you can just take the sword and start using it. It's just not the thing. So as you can see with Disarmed, and I'm actually going to put that in here, is one of the actions we can take, which is agility versus guard. We can do that without having to I didn't need to do that again. Without having to do that. Same is true about the pushing attack. Well, this is just something we can already do. Now, because it's only level 4, we can only move them 10 feet, but it's not limited to once per short rest. Anytime we want to use our action to do that, we can. Now, another thing about Open Legend is if your attack exceeds your opponent's guard or whatever you're targeting by more than 10, you can just add on a bane for free. So we could make an attack, it's really good, and then push them as part of that attack, which is basically how it works with the marshals, the superiority dice. Basically, you make an attack. If you hit, you can add the dice to it and make it a pushing attack. You can add the dice to it, make it a disarming attack. So very similar. It's just this can do it more often. So again, since we're making this the same basic character, we can go for forced move. So pretty good. Now, what about the key aspect? You know, the ability to move really fast, or you know, become harder to hit, or any of those the things. We rarely have multi-attack specialists for the flurry of blows. But if we go to boons, one of the things we can do is haste. Now, a boon, you basically use your action, or it'll tell you what kind of action. This is a major action. To modify how things work. Kind of similar to burning a key point, though the key points generally are like bonus actions for the most part, where this is your major action, but this lasts a while, so it's kind of comparing apples to oranges. But if we want to be faster, power level 2, which only requires a roll of 14. So with our character right now, we would be a D20 plus a D10, so technically a max of 30, and we have to get a 14 or higher. So we basically have a 50-50 chance of that. Now, with Open Legend, there's another thing where all dice explode, meaning if I roll a 10 on the D10, I keep that 10 and then add another D10 roll to it. Same is true about the D20. So I've seen rolls that are in the 80s. So it is very possible to get really high rolls. So the probability here is hard to predict in general, or it takes a lot more math than I'm willing to do. But in general, you have a pretty good chance of doing that, and you can sustain it, which is a minor action. You can sustain it as long as you want. You can only sustain one thing at a time. But that's pretty good. If you do power level 4, which we can do because we have 4 in movement, That requires a DC 18, so a little bit harder, but it's 15 feet, so it's faster than the other monk, and it adds 1 to guard, so it's harder to hit. Very much something that fits into our monk. So I'm going to actually put that haste in here at power level 4, which is the maximum we can do it at. It's going to be movement. So we've got that, and that's really cool. That's very monk-like, the ability to move super fast and to do other things. Now, when you get to higher levels, you power level 6, you can make 1 extra major action on each of your turn. Again, that turns into a DC 22 roll, which is rough. But again, at that point, you're rolling a D20 plus 2D8. So before exploding, you're looking at up to a 36 that you can roll. So not impossible. You get faster, harder to hit, and now you can do even more actions. And if it requires a roll, it suffers the disadvantage 3. So it's a little bit harder to do. But it still means you can do it. And because the advantage and the disadvantage only affects your attribute dice and not the D20 at all, you can have disadvantage like 42 and still make your roll if you roll high enough on the D20 or if the D20 explodes. So overall, like haste, really, really good and really helps us to play that kind of character we were thinking about. Does it happens differently, but it's still pretty cool. Another thing we can do, which is a monk ability that you get at level 6 if you choose Way of Shadow, is you can teleport. This is only done from movement. This is actually not an uncommon thing to see in like martial arts films and stuff like that. Like ninjas are known to like throw a smoke ball down and then they kind of vanish. And again, in D&D, there's a couple classes that have been able to do this throughout the history of D&D, but it's an ability called Shadow Step, which lets you just step between shadows and to teleport. For this, because of a forward movement, you can teleport the targets. You can teleport yourself, or theoretically, you could teleport someone else. Again, this is a generic ability that's meant to apply to a lot of different archetypes and the things like that. So with our monk abilities, we would kind of focus on the ability just to teleport ourselves, because that's what our movement is. It's our internal key. Maybe at higher levels, we might be able to bamf with someone with us. But again, you're going to really just limit yourself based on what you feel your character would able to do. Whereas in D&D, you'll be limited by the rules itself. But yeah, this is an ability that in D&D we need to be level 6 to get. Open Legend, we can actually just add it right now. We're going to put movement. It takes a move action instead of your major action, so you can teleport and attack in the same turn. Turn into a really cool, kind of very mobile martial artist. Now, if we go back to the baboons again, there's other things that you technically have the ability to do. You could make yourself a psychic monk and have the ability to move objects with your mind. You could use movement, your movement score, to radiate an aura. The rules for auras are remarkably complicated, as with everything in a Classless system. So I'm not going to go into everything about it, but it's there. You could absorb objects into yourself. So, like, you could have a staff that just kind of appears out of your hand or something like that, depending on how you want to play the character. Again, the way you're going to limit yourself is, well, what would my character feasibly be able to do? If you're munchkinning this or min-maxing this, you're going to use everything here and not care about. You'll just come up with some excuse, which again creates issues for other players that are limiting their character based on the kind of character they want to play. So again, but pluses and minuses. But really, this is our character now. We have everything built up. We have the ability. We can make the agility versus guard. So as you can see, we can disarm people. We can force move them. We can punch. Theoretically, we have access to every one of these banes. Stun, very much like the stunning strike, or incapacitated would also be very similar to that. We can knock them down. We can silence people with a punch. We can demoralize them. We can deafen and blind. It all is going to depend on how you define your character as far as what they can and can't do, and that really is the basis of a classless RPG. You're going to have more freedom in creating a very specific character that plays the exact way you want it to a point, but you're also it's also going to force you to know the system a little bit better, because there's not kind of a guiding force like a class in a class-based RPG like D&D that's going to tell you what you can and can't do. And if you just completely don't limit yourself at all, it will soon very much become kind of Superman syndrome, where, well, I have all the powers, and I can do whatever I want. Yeah. Going with both of those, just as a kind of wrap up, since this has been a very long video, the basics of classless versus class-based as far as pluses and minuses. Class-based, first of all, is a lot easier for a beginner to get into, because having some structure makes it easier to start off. As you become better at it, or as you just become more familiar with how RPGs work and everything, either system has benefits. But for your first game, classless tends to be a lot easier, or class-based, I mean, tends to be a lot easier to get into. Class-based, another advantage of class-based is you're going to feel special. Your character is going to feel special, and unless someone else at the table is playing the exact same class and makes the exact same choices you do, you're going to have a lot of things that only you can do. Obviously, that varies between the RPG. If you go back to just earlier editions of D&D, like second edition, all your melee classes at level 1 kind of felt the same as far as combat was concerned. The only difference was what weapon you were using, what armor you were wearing. The same was true about casters. They all kind of felt the same. It was just which spells you could cast and how often you could cast them. But most modern ones, even right from the beginning, you're going to feel special because of the class you had. You're going to have a little more guidance as far as how to build the character. You're going to have a more guidance on how the character fits into the world with lore and things like that. So those are all really big benefits of a class-based system. Downsides. You are that thing where you feel special and you're kind of focused. is also kind of a downside. If you want to make a really interesting character, it's going to be harder in a class-based versus a classless. You're going to have to know the system very well. You're going to have to game it a little bit, but play with different things to get the exact character you want. If your character doesn't, if your character idea doesn't fit into a specific archetype. In addition to that, as you get to higher levels in class-based systems, especially if you're using multi-classing or anything like that, it can become very easy to get lost once you start adding extra classes. And because the abilities are more specialized, they can give you more powerful abilities. Because and then when those abilities start interacting, it can get very confusing. When we switch to a classless system, the sky's the limit as far as how you want to make your character. If you want to, play a thief who uses, various spoons as weapon implements, and you have throwing spoons and, stabbing spoons and slicing spoons and and blunt spoons, you can do that. If you want to be a character that, while they were venturing one day, they actually fell into a pit of poison and got this horrible disease that makes them create poison in themselves. And so all of their attacks are about expelling this noxious stuff out of them so that they can live. You can do that in a classless RPG. And it's a lot easier than it is in a class-based RPG. However, the downfall is going to be, it is going to be more complicated right from the beginning, and everything gets more complicated the higher levels you go in both systems. So you're going to have to kind of just set aside time to go, okay, I need to learn this system, and I'm going to have to sit down with it and do it. You're going to lose a little bit of that specialness that you feel, because in order to allow you to make any kind of character you want, they also have to kind of allow anyone to make any kind of character they want. And but because of that, there's going to be a lot of abilities that you feel are intrinsic to your character that really anyone can do mechanically. And it'll be entirely based upon you and your game master, dungeon master, to decide where the limits are. The limits are not written into the system, whereas with a class-based system, they will tell you specifically. If you want a multi-class, you need these attributes. If you want to take this feat, you need to be able to do this. If you want to use this weapon, you need to be able to do this. Yeah. I hope you guys found this interesting. It turned out actually as long as I expected. I didn't think this is going to be a short video, but it turned into one of my longer videos in general. If you guys are interested in this type of stuff, or if you'd like me to start doing more delves into other RPG systems other than D&D, let me know in the comments below. Or if you would prefer I just stick to D&D, that's fine too. I can tell you, even if I start looking into other RPGs, D&D is still kind of my home. For this foreseeable future, this is going to be a D&D kind of focused channel. Most of my content will be about D&D. That's just where it's fitting for me right now. But I may start talking about other systems and stuff like that, just to give you a little bit better idea of what's out there. And to be blunt, I collect RPG systems. Every time a Humble Bundle has a RPG books bundle, I buy it because they're great. And I actually find inspiration for my own homebrew content and stuff by looking at other systems and going, hey, that's a really cool idea. I wonder if I could make that work in D&D 5e. And it doesn't just have to be like classes or abilities, even things like how they deal with skill checks or skill challenges, or how they do the narrative. One of the big things I've taken from Open Legend is based on the idea that every role matters. So in D&D, you might have a bunch of people walk into a room, and one of them goes, I want to search the room for traps. Another person will pipe in, I want to search for traps as well. Another one will pipe in, I want to search for traps as well. And all three will make rolls, only one of which is really going to matter. In Open Legend, every roll matters. So if people went into this same room and three people wanted to do it, whoever spoke up first would be allowed to make their roll, and we would resolve that. And there's three ways you can resolve a roll in Open Legend. You can succeed, so you get exactly what you want. And that's true about any RPG. That's how they all work. You can succeed with a twist, which means you get what you want, but you also get something unexpected that might be good or might be bad, but it's generally going to change this system. Or you can fail, but the plot moves forward. So, for example, with the checking for traps thing, they succeed. You go, you notice a pressure plate right here. They got what they wanted. If you succeed with a twist, it might be, you find a pressure point, but you find it by accidentally stepping on it. It hasn't triggered anything yet because you didn't fully put on, but now you have a different situation. Or if you fail, but the story moves forward, while you're looking for traps, you set off the trap, and the roof starts slowly coming down to crush you. No one else really needs to make a check for traps check, because you found the trap by setting it off. And now you have another thing that is going to occupy your time. So I actually use that in my D&D games now, where I try a lot more often to make every roll count, and much less do I, when people fail rolls, I try not to just be, you failed, you just wasted your roll. I try and make it a little bit more, well, you failed, but the story's going to move forward because of your failure. Stuff like that. So, anyway, again, that's all for me today, and I will see you guys in the next time. All right? Bye-bye.